Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I almost didn't do a podcast this week. In fact, to be honest with you, this is literally being recorded on Sunday night, hours before. Well, actually, I should probably be in bed by now, but I'm going to still try to get this out to you as part of the regularly scheduled piece. So if you see this come up on a normal basis or my normal time frame, just assume that I stayed up a little later getting this ready for you. Not a guilt trip, just throwing out there an Easter egg. But, I was thinking a lot about the last podcast upload. If I'm not mistaken, it was a slap heard around the world, right? And arguably, probably the most lengthiest podcast I've put out to date. And yeah, as part of the editing process, you listen to things a few times. And when it's an hour-long podcast, there's a lot of hours put into that, right? Right, there it is again. And so I've had my opportunities to think that one over. And do I change my stance on things? Hell no. I'm still right there where I am with that. But I've come to make other realizations, right? Not about that topic. I can care less about that topic. It's over. It's done with. I still have the same views because when I make these podcasts, I'm not making sporadic or just emotional outbursts about what I feel about something. I've thought this through. I put serious thought into things. That's just my approach. And those of you that know me know that, I think a lot. I grew up single child probably, and some of my past experiences have developed me into a person that thinks a lot. So much so that hard turning it off sometimes. But that's not the point of the podcast. The point of this is I was listening to the podcast and I was thinking about it, and it's kind of fascinating because, for most people, it got a lot of views, more so than I think I usually get, which is cool, right? Everybody likes that when they're putting out content. See, a lot of people in these situations would look at that and say, well, what do I do to continue to get those views, right? And then the obvious answer there is to continue doing taboo topics that are very mainstream and very topical and things that people want to get in the tea about, right? Well, that's not where my mind goes. My mind goes instantly about thinking about what drew people to that topic. And yeah, it's very, very topical, right? But it's because it's a taboo subject and it's very in the media now. Any sort of media, social media, news, whatever. We're all bombarded with this topic and this viewpoint. And to me, it's interesting because I look at that. And my podcast has evolved over the years. And I still would want to continue doing interviews. I think that those are incredibly fun to do, especially with something that I find entertaining, right? But the fascinating thing for me is, I think people probably listen to that podcast waiting for some weird taboo, funny, oh, da-da-da-da, right? And I think some of you have started getting a taste for what this podcast is. And a lot of times it's more introspective, hopefully thought-provoking, thought-invoking content where you're sitting there and thinking about something, hopefully questioning your perspectives or other people, my perspective on something and whether or not it's valid or not. I also am not here to convince you of my topic or my stance on something. It's more about giving you my perspective so that you know other people's perspectives based on their development and experiences that have made them the person that they are. So kind of that's where my podcast is, right? It's kind of where I think it is, and I like it there. I enjoy the concepts of higher thinking. I enjoy sitting there sometimes, who you are, when I'm sitting there talking to you about philosophical debates about this person or that person, even if it is just celebrity gossip and whatever. But we get into the real topics of the dynamics of male and female and the dynamics of dating and people and who they are and what possesses people to do this or that. When you get into those conversations, it's That to me is substance. That to me is a real conversation between people. Anybody that knows me knows that I hate what people call water cooler talk. If you ever, and I've said this on the podcast, I'm sure, if you ever hear me talking about the weather, I'm likely in my head, like, thinking about a project. I hate it. I hate it because that to me isn't substance. I'm not getting to know you. I'm not getting to know anything about you. And even if you come at me with yeah, it's going to be 90 degrees tomorrow. Oh my God, it's so hot. I can't believe it. I don't like this heat. Right? If you're coming at me with that still doesn't tell me anything about you except that maybe you like to complain. That's just me, right? I love substance. I love discussing things about what people think and feel and really their perspective on life, because a lot of these interviews that I've done with people are fascinating to me because I know I'll never get those perspectives on life. I never will, because I'll never be insert blank, right? I'll never be a firefighter pilot. I'll never be a firefighter. So like those interviews that I've done are fascinating me because those are their experiences, their life experiences. And in this life, we are often dominated and I mean, anything, all dominated. We're empowered, we're developed, we are a byproduct of those experiences. And depending on what you do will affect that, right? I know of people in the, let's just say, wide realm of law enforcement. And I see how though that career has taken a toll on some of these friends of mine that are in that field. It takes a toll. And so they're a byproduct of that career choice. They're a byproduct of that road they chose to take. And I'm not judging them for it. Everybody should be allowed to do whatever they want as long as it doesn't hurt other people. But my point to this is saying that in having these conversations and having these honest conversations where you can be unbiased, where you can be vulnerable, where you could be open to new ideas, is when you really get to know other people. And that for me is fucking exciting. And that to me is when you really get to know someone. You know, we really get to know people in different aspects from different ways, right? You get to know people and how good of a person they are based on how they react to certain things. You get to see how nice and generous a person is based on how maybe they give gifts, or maybe how they donate their time or money or give away to charity. You get to know how great people are, whether or not they're I don't know, dog people, the way they interact with dogs. You know, and in many ways, you get to find out how people deal with struggles in life based on when they are in those struggles. And because you can't be there for everybody's, all of those things, it's often through these conversations that you really get the substance of someone's being. And that to me is great, because that's when you're making a real connection with someone. Because if I'm talking to somebody about the weather, I can care less, and you're not making a connection with anybody. You're basically doing the equivalent of looking through a news website trying to fill your time. That's what you're doing. There's nothing you're taking out of that, likely. Well, some people take things out of news, right? Because they get empowered or via knowledge or angry about the thing. But you know what I mean. There's no substance there. There's no connection, no human connection there. So to bring it all back to the topic, I think my podcast, this section of the podcast where you guys allow me to kind of vent and regurgitate my brain a little bit. I think these podcasts are not for everyone. And I don't say that to dissuade people, because I'm not trying to push anybody away from listening to this. I would love for people to listen to the podcast. But the reality is these are in the grandiose scheme of what I'm trying to do here. It is about thoughts and putting ideas out there and questioning yours and maybe giving you new perspectives depending on how other people operate, right? And not a lot of people, I can't say that. I haven't met enough people to say a lot of people, right? My sample data is probably not great enough to be able to say a lot. But in my experience, people aren't necessarily always extremely focused on working on themselves. And that's what leads you to this kind of podcast, right? This kind of podcast, I think, is people that want to question things because they're looking for brain puzzles, ideas to kind of tinker with. They're looking for understanding of other people. They're looking for and just different perspectives on life, because people often aren't having these conversations, which is kind of sad, So if you're not looking for that type of podcast, this is not likely one for you, right? And I thought the topic I wrote on my little notes here about this podcast was simple, one sentence, and it basically just read, "This podcast is not entertainment. This podcast is work." And in my experience, most people are not willing to work, especially for things that are difficult in life, right? How many people do you know that obviously have things they have to fix in themselves and avoid it? This could be applicable to your fitness, your health. This could be applicable to maybe career choices. This could be applicable to maybe these reoccurring choices you make with your dating or your partners. Maybe these could be reoccurring ways that you use your money and how you're broke. Whatever it is, most people find ways to avoid the work, to really self-analyze yourself and those around you, and really start analyzing and making improvements. The work is hard. I'll give it to you. And in a day like today, these days, in a first world country like the one I live in, with the amount of entertainment that is at your fingertips, you can easily fill your full day with distractions. Whether it's researching something that you really don't need to research, whether it's sticking to the news, whether it's watching sports all day, whether it's playing video games all day, whether it's a constant mix of Netflix, Hulu, Prime, whether it's any sort of entertainment. You've got unlimited music to your fingertips. You have a whole web. You have the internet that can essentially give you anything and everything that you want at any given point. So it is easily a situation where you could fill your full day, and that's just entertainment. Let's say you have regular human duties like a job, responsibilities like a home or pets or kids. You can easily fill your whole day and make excuses for yourself by not putting in the work. So with all that being said, I'll leave you guys with this, because this is going to be a short one, as we alluded to in the beginning. You can't run from the work, because the work that you're avoiding is the work that will continue to show up in your life again. Let's pretend like you have an issue with your spending, and you continue to just maintain your spending habits and never get out of that hole. It'll keep coming back. You need to do the work, is to either figure out how to manage your money better, make more money, do a combination of the both, maybe probably, make better decisions on what you're doing or why you're buying things, whether it's things you actually need or not. Like, all of those things are things you got to start asking yourself, questioning yourself, propelling your mind into a position where you start really self-analyzing and exploring yourself. Now let's pretend it wasn't money. Let's pretend it's maybe you date abusive people, right? Maybe you need to ask yourself why you keep finding abusive people, especially if people around you aren't dating abusive people, right? Or I can give you another example. Let's say you don't want to work on your fitness and you find excuses doing this or that, or you're finding you're too busy to do this or that, and now all of a sudden you have to take 3-4 medications just to be able to survive on a normal day-to-day. Maybe you're 20-30 pounds overweight, and now you have a hard time mobilizing throughout your day. Maybe you have high activity and you can't really do what you should be doing. People avoid the work because nobody wants to feel like they're responsible for what they've done to themselves. but the work is truth. When you put in the work and you actually progress and propel yourself to a better position or status or whatever, and improve yourself in any way, that's the thing I was talking about. That's substance. That's the thing that at least I'm looking for. I'd rather talk to the guy who was extremely broke and managed to fix his ways, and we could talk about that. We could talk about how that was. Or I'd rather talk to the guy who was extremely obese as a kid, and he managed to motivate himself, and now he's like super fit dude, right? I'd rather talk to that because that's substance, that's real, that's something he lived through. And I'm gonna tell you right now, those of you that are avoiding the work, you're stealing from yourself. You're stealing essentially from your life because you're choosing to live a muted life for no reason at all. You're stealing yourself from a certain level, probably a very high level of self-accomplishment. Because let's be honest, and this is what I'll leave you with because I'm getting rather verbose. I'll leave you with this. Think back on your life. And seriously do this. Think back on your life and think about things that were extremely rewarding to you in your life. Things that you took tremendous pleasure to do, to achieve. How about that? Because we could all sit there and be like, oh, no, gives you tremendous pleasure. That's what she said. But think back on your life and think about things that have given you tremendous excitement, happiness, pleasure, accomplishment to achieve. Let's pretend that it's your first jiu-jitsu competition, or if it's the fact that you lost 50 pounds, you kept it off, the fact that you managed to get that degree you were always looking for, you managed to get that job you always wanted, you whatever it is, whatever your accomplishment is, think back to that thing. How much more rewarding is that accomplishment than going on Amazon and buying something and getting it shipped to you? How long was that excitement for that thing that you bought on Amazon? How long did that last? 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, when you're older, when you're gray, what are you going to remember? That way you transformed your life? Or how that feeling you got when you opened up the Amazon package? That's it. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys next time.